Welcome everyone to the UFC Pros Pick Show. I am James Lynch. He is Nick Kalikas. He is James Krause. Thank you so much for tuning in here today. We're going to be looking at the UFC Vegas 40 card, which goes down this Saturday at the Apex in Las Vegas. We're going to be talking about the main event and co-main event. We're also going to be giving some prop bets as well. Gentlemen, let's start first with the co-main event. It is Andrei Arlovski, the former heavyweight champion, taking on Carlos Felipe. And all the books I'm seeing right now has Andrei Arlovski as the favorite, the underdog as Carlos Felipe. Nick, your thoughts on this fight and the odds where they're sort of set right now?
I mean, right now it's close to a pick 'em fight. It's been close to a pick 'em fight the whole way through. I'm seeing in Las Vegas, at least right now, it's currently minus 115 Felipe, and the comeback on Arlovski is around minus 105. So again, near pick 'em fight. I think it's close because this is one of those tester type of fights, obviously, for Felipe. If he could get over that hump and beat Arlovski, he gets himself in the legit mix. I mean, Arlovski's been used as a gatekeeper, so to speak, right, for a while now, and he's closed that gate on several promising prospects in the heavyweight division. So I think it's another one of those type of fights. I think if Felipe does have that power, does have that ability to knock people out, and Arlovski has had that chin checked in the past. So I do lean a little bit his way, so I understand where this line is.
And Coach Krause, what are you thinking with this fight? Because I'm looking at this on paper. It looks like the UFC is trying to build up a prospect in Felipe, and obviously Arlovski at 43 is not someone I think they have in their long-term plans. Do you think the odds are set correctly here?
I'll be honest with you, I kind of lean the other way. When you look at level of competition, you look at Felipe, he's won 2 split decisions in a row against Justin Toffler, he's not currently in the UFC. And then Collier, I think Jake Collier, I think he's on a 2-fight losing streak. He's won both of those fights, but they're both split decisions. If you go on the counter side of that, you look at Arlovski, and like you said, he's beat some really good prospects. And he's only lost to the really good guys in the division. And I know there was a little skid a few years ago where he was seemed a little chinny, but I feel like he's kind of overcame that, you know. I feel like he's kind of shown that he can stay in there. He's beat some, Tanner Bozer. He beat who's a big puncher. I'm drawing a blank on who he's beat right now, but I looked at it earlier, and the level of competition is not even close. So for me, if I get a pick 'em fight and the level of competition is heavily leaned on one side, I gotta go with that guy. The guy's got experience. The guy's fought high level guys. Felipe has won a couple really close fights to the prospects themselves. So I got to lean Arlovski here.
And I'll complete the hat trick here. I think Arlovski has a good opportunity here as well. He's coming off that win over Chase Sherman in his last fight. You know, Sherman had a great camp leading into that at Sanford MMA. Just the one loss to Tom Aspinall. But guys, Tom Aspinall looks like the future of this division. There's a few up and comers in that division. Tom Aspinall is one of them. I think the odds are set correctly here, and it'll be a good test for Felipe. But can Arlovski still get it done at 42 years old? That's what we're going to find out here on Saturday night. Let's get to the main event. This is a really weird fight. It was supposed to be Norma Dumont and Holly Holm. Insert Aspen Ladd, who was supposed to fight a few weeks ago against Macy Chasson, does not make weight. Chasson refuses to fight. Ladd, the fight's canceled, and now Ladd's moving up a weight class. Right now, Aspen Ladd, on most of the books we're seeing right now, about a minus 138, anywhere to minus 150. Nick, what do you think about the odds being this way? Do you think the line here was set correctly?
Well, I mean, of course, I think it's Ladd as a slight favorite is correct because of the people that she's fought, the competition that she's faced. Obviously, the weight issues cutting down to 135 wasn't great for her. We've known that historically it's been kind of a problem for her. So I think 145 is actually not bad. And I think she's going to be ready to fight. But Dumont is no joke, man. I mean, again, she hasn't been in the UFC as long. She hasn't faced the level of competition, obviously, as Ladd, but she's legit. She has that power. She's a very strong physical fighter. She has a takedown ability as well. So Dumont can possibly play spoiler here in this move up for Ladd here. I think it's a very difficult fight. It's going to be a good test for her as well.
And James, what do you make of the layoff for Aspen Ladd? Knee surgery, hasn't fought since December of 2019. You're a guy who's had layoffs himself. You've had fighters that come in with a bit of cage rust, so to speak. Will that be a factor in this fight for Aspen Ladd? Or in some ways, with the fact she's not having to cut that extra weight, does that play to her advantage?
I don't know why we're talking about the weight. I mean, both these ladies have had trouble making 35 in the past. To me, it's a wash. You know what I mean? Like they both have missed at 35. And they're coming up to 45. So to me, it's a wash. I don't think one is bigger than the other. But honestly, when I look at this fight, it kind of reminds me of the co-main event, right? Like it's when I see somebody with a much bigger level of competition, it's hard for me not to lean to that person. You look at Norma Dumont, who's looked incredible her last 2 fights, but both of those fights have been against wrestlers / grapplers. And I think she's missed weight on both of those fights, I'm pretty sure. And not by a small margin. We're talking like 4 or 5 pounds, if I remember correctly. But neither one of those fighters were good strikers. We're talking about Ashley Evans Smith and Felicia Spencer. They're more wrestler grapplers. So Dumont's got good takedown defense, but I do feel like the level of competition is going to be a really big jump here from those two ladies to Aspen Ladd. I mean, Aspen is she's been in there with a much higher level of competition. Once again, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but whenever you get a fight that's really close like this and you have one person that's heavily favored in the level of competition, I always want to lean towards that person just because I feel like they've been in there. They know what it's like, especially going 5 rounds here. I lean Aspen a little bit more.
Let me just jump in and say this, if you don't mind, James.
Yeah, go for
it.
Go
breakdown goes. I mean, for me, I look at it and I think that Aspen Ladd has a little bit of defensive issues, though. That's why I think Dumont's going to give her some problems, because I think Dumont is actually the better striker on the feet. She flows a little bit better. I think she can be a little bit more effective. And I think she's strong enough possibly to stop the takedown attempts from Ladd. So for me, it's hard laying the chalk because I think they match up so well together, and defensively they both have issues. You know, there's both have concerns big time in that regard, but offensively they can both bring it and they can both finish fights. So this should be a fun fight. They both tend to gas as the fight progresses a little bit as well. So I think they're going to slow down and we're going to see a finish before it hits the scorecards here. But I think it's a dog or pass situation, honestly, in my perspective.
Well, I actually agree with Nick in terms of a dog or pass situation. In terms of something else, you know, we talked about the weight cut, but Aspen tried to make weight 2 weeks ago, so now she's fighting again. That's got to take a toll a little bit, and it was not a pretty scene in that weight cut with her being on the scale. I know she had an issue, sort of a medical issue, that time of the month type thing, right? But still, the fact that it was another struggling weight cut, she had the exact same problem against Duran Durandamy, and we know that she did not perform well in that fight. She got finished quite early in that fight, so that's the only area of concern I see for Aspen going into this fight. But we got to leave it to James here. I forgot that Megan Anderson actually knocked out Norma Dumont. So James, of all people, would know her better than most people. And I agree. I think when she had that fight against Megan, Aspen's kind of similar in the sense that I think Aspen actually does pack a punch, right? We saw what she did to Yana Kunitskaya. Is that going to be the same issue here for Norma where, you know, she might be the better striker, but that doesn't mean she can take a punch like she could, you know, in other fights. So that's where things get a little bit interesting for me as well. I did speak to Aspen's coach, Jim West, earlier this week with some concerns about the weight cut. And he assures me that they've been in contact with the PI. They wouldn't be licensing this fight unless, you know, it was something that was safe. So if Aspen's on her game, I think it's her fight to lose. But I do think that still the fact that she had to go through not 1, but 2 weight cuts because she had the first canceled fight with Macy back in July and the layoff, it does seem like a dog or pass situation. But does that change your mind at all, James? Or are you still sticking with Aspen?
No, this at 145, right?
It is at 145. Yeah.
Yeah, she's not. I mean, the cut's not going to be much for her. I mean, once you cut that weight,
well, no,
I
don't mean the cut. I don't mean her making the weight. I just mean the fact that she had a tough cut and that she's having to like replenish only 2 weeks ago. Do you not think that's a factor or no?
No. I mean, for sure, she got some water back in her, and I don't think that'll be a factor here. You know, if we were cutting back to 35 again, for sure. But then we go back to the thing where we're talking about. Man, both these girls are the same. I don't think the weight cut from 2 weeks ago is going to affect her. I really don't. I'm sure she took the necessary steps. If she's working with the PI, I know she took the necessary steps to make sure that she's rehydrated again. The cut for either one of these girls, I don't think is going to be huge. I don't think it's going to be a factor. And I'll tell you what, I'm really excited too, because I do feel like at 135, I feel like both of these girls have put out kind of a saturated version of themselves. So I'm actually kind of excited to see both these girls fed, hydrated, and see what they, you know, maybe potentially what they could live up to. I think maybe we've seen like a lesser version of both of them. So I'm kind of excited to watch this fight and see what these girls can bring.
And that's why you're going to be in the cage on Saturday night cornering Julian Marquez, and I'm going to be on my couch because you actually know, you know what you're talking about here, James. That's why I ask. I got to ask the expert here when it comes to these analysis, when it comes to these fights. Before we get out of here, gentlemen, some prop bets this weekend. You know, actually speaking of the fight you're going to be involved with Julian Marquez and Jordan Wright, I think the fight does not go the distance prop is probably the best bet here. You know, I think for me, well, he's shaking his head, but I think if Julian wins this fight, it's going to be by finish. Jordan Wright's a finisher as well. We saw what he did to Jamie Pickett in his last fight. Jordan typically does not go the distance. And Julian, I think last time he went the distance was against Trico. He's been finishing a lot of fights as well. That's a prop I was looking at if you wanted to play it safe on either side. But what are some prop bets you guys are looking at? We'll start with you, Coach Krause.
I mean, I agree. The problem with that is the over under is 1.5. It's not. I mean, if you can pick, doesn't go distance. I completely agree with that. My favorite play is on this one. It's kind of, man, it's such a weird card, honestly. Like there's a lot of like these matchups. There's a bunch of question marks. So there's typically, like Nick and I have done this in the past, but there's usually a fight on this card where I'm like, I love this fight. I love this fight. And although I love Julian's fight, I really try to stay away from my own guys. But as far as a prop bet goes, I'm going to go with over 2.5 rounds on Carlos Felipe and Andre Arlovski. I really think that both these guys. I don't think Felipe is he's not a huge puncher. You know, he's gone to decision his last few fights, and Arlovski's kind of in the same boat. So I think these guys, for being heavyweights, I think we're going to see these guys go the distance, which is kind of a scary bet to place, but I really like it here.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting play there, especially with the fact you might think Arlovski's chin's gone. The last 2 knockout losses he had were, get this, Rosenstruik and Ngannou before that. So a little bit different with Carlos Felipe than those 2 gentlemen, no offense, but sort of looking at that. Nick, is there something you have your eye on as far as a prop bet on this card? Again, a bit of a tricky card when it comes to the betting perspective.
There's a couple props I like. Honestly, I'm going to go with what you just said there, James, a little bit, James Lynch, about James Krause's guy, Marquez. I think he can finish right there, and I don't think that fight goes. So around -140, -150, I think there's a little bit of value. If you don't want to lay the chalk on Marquez right now, I believe he's like -200-ish. He's 2.5 to 1.
He's like 250 now.
Yeah. So if you don't want to lay that, if he wins, he's probably going to get it done inside. So -150, it kind of reduces that a little bit, obviously, but he has to win by, finish. So I think there's some value there. And I think if you're going to bet Dumont, man, I don't know. If she wins, it's probably going to be a finish, maybe before it hits a scorecard. It's a late finish. So Dumont inside the distance, you can get around +350s out there. So I think that's another prop, at least to target and maybe put a little bit something on and see how that fight plays out. Okay.
Before we wrap up the show here, we got to get to our best bets. We'll start first with the coach, James Krause. What fight are you leaning the most towards here as far as a best bet on UFC Vegas 40?
I actually have 2. One, if you guys have watched anything that I've done before, I'm usually a real chalk player. So I'm going to give you one chalky bet, and then I'm going to give you a closer one. I really try to avoid these, but I really like my guy Julian Marquez here. I really do. I think it's a great fight for him. I think I like what Nick said earlier. If you're going to play Julian, I think he's going to finish the fight as well. But I think Marquez gets it done, and I think he stops Jordan Wright. But I straight played Julian. And then the other one that's a little bit more even, and I feel like he's kind of getting disrespected here, is Andre Arlovski. We talked about this earlier, but like if you look at the level of competition, it's not even close. Like Arlovski's level of competition is light years ahead of Carlos Felipe. I'm a huge fan of Carlos Felipe and his style, but he's coming off 2 split decision wins over Jake Collier and Justin Tafa. The level of competition between those 2 guys and Andre Arlovski, it's not comparable, So for that reason, if I get a coin flip fight and I feel like one guy is favored, I got to go with the guy that I feel like is got a higher level of competition, and I think he's going to win the fight, and that's Andre Arlovski.
There you go. Mr. Kalikas, who are you favoring as far as your best bet on this card?
I like it, James. I can understand it. I can respect that for sure. For me, it's going to be Brandon Davis. The return of Brandon Davis, I think, as a dog, that's going to be a very intriguing. That's going to be a close fight. I think he has multiple ways to win that fight. Maturel is a very tough fighter. I understand why he's the slight favorite coming into this fight. But if you're going to make your re-entrance into the UFC, this is a good spot for him. So I think around +140, +150s that are out there still, there's a lot of value on Brandon Davis as an underdog. I think this should be closer to a toss-up type of fight. So I think he makes his return. He's been on a roll, and he deserves to get that second opportunity in the UFC. So it's Brandon Davis for me.
And I'll complete the hat trick here. I also like Davis as well, Nick. He was someone I recommended on my preview show this past week. I'm going to do a parlay here. I really like Manon Furio. This girl is knocking girls out at 125. People are talking about what could be next for Valentina. It's probably not her, but she's starting to make some noise in this division. And I think this is a fight where she's going to go out again and get another spectacular finish, but at -245, a little steep for my liking. So I'm going to parlay her with Jim Miller. Jim Miller's fighting a newcomer in Eric Gonzalez. Gonzalez has been finished a few times on the regional scene. Definitely a guy who's put in his time on the regional scene. He came over from Combate, but he does have a lot of losses. Jim Miller has way more experience. He's also a guy that is not showing his age these days. He's still picking up good wins, and his losses are against guys that are pretty solid in the division, including Vince Pichel and a lot of other fighters that have really been outstanding in the weight class. So I think a Miller and Furio parlay is the way to go. They're both about 2-1 favorites. I think that hits as far as a bet for Saturday, and I think you're going to be in the safe zone there with those 2. So there you go. That is my best bet of the week. As we wrap things up here, again, I just want to remind everyone to check out Bet DSI. Also, make sure you follow myself on Twitter, follow James Krause at @TheJamesKrause, and Nick Kalikas as well. We all got stuff going on. Anything you guys want to plug before we get out of here? Nick, I'll start with you first, and then we'll end with James.
We're back, baby. It's great to see you again, James Krause. It's great to work with you again, James Lynch. I know it's been a while, so I'm just glad we're back. Miss you guys, and looking forward to having some fun times. Now, let me just say this. I mean, this show is obviously, this was kind of our little soft launch, so to speak, right? So there's a lot more bells, whistles, and a lot more things coming that we have to look forward to for sure. And from time to time, I'm not going to be available to be on the show. So I'll just say that I do have a UFC Fight Pass obligation. So the weeks that I have a Fight Pass show, I'm probably going to have a fill-in, but that doesn't mean the show won't go on. We're going to have a very capable fill-in in that regard. So I just want to give the viewers out there a heads up of what's to come, but very excited. And like I said, love working with James Krause, love working with you, James Lynch. This should be a fun time.
One thing you can guarantee, there will be a James here every week. We can at least make that promise for sure. Mr. Krause, before we go, anything you got to mention before we get out of here?
No, man, I'm glad to be back in business. It's something I really enjoy. Let's see if we can keep the streak alive.
We will. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. My name is James Lynch. We will see you guys next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. And this is myself signing off. Have a great evening and enjoy the fights this weekend.